I looked out across the pond, at the bright lights of the nearby flats which towered over the local estate, reflected on the surface of its shimmering waters like underwater tower blocks. I knew there would be a lot more to see at this time of night, if my eyes would only adjust to the inky darkness. The birds which usually graced the pond during the bright afternoon were now all safely nesting amongst the reeds and bulrushes on the small island in the deepest part of the water. The hour still wasn't particularly late, and I could hear the sound of children laughing and chattering in their usual youthful manner, and joyous screams as they played in the playground at the far edge of the park. There was a large expanse of green field between the children's play area and the pond, but the air seemed still, and an unusual silence carried the sound crisp and clear to my ears, with no trace of its usual tinniness. The only exception to the still evening air was the occasional blast of the bracing breeze as it caressed my cheeks, turning my nose pink and numb, and I rubbed my gloved hands together vigorously, blowing into them to try and restore some of the circulation to my frozen face. I thought about the ducks, about the male mallards with their iridescent green heads, and the somewhat territorial Canada geese, with eyes like small black pebbles set within their beautiful charcoal faces. The small island hardly seemed big enough for them all, but I'd often witnessed them bedding down amongst the tall grasses during twilight, just as the sun was setting the sky aflame. I continued along the narrow winding path, carved out of the juicy green grass, which would often shimmer with fresh dew during early summer mornings, each blade bearing crystal crowns. But it was another form of crystal entirely which dusted them on this evening. The yellowing winter skies had summoned snow from the grey clouds which had been hanging thick and heavy over the town for most of the day, turning everywhere I looked into a canvas of sparkling white. I thought about each individual snowflake, formed like an exquisite and expensive gem, as the layer of snow crunched like crushed diamonds beneath my booted feet. I had always loved that sound, and knew that I had come at just the right time, as the crisp white coating would be reduced to a slushy grey sludge by the following afternoon. As I continued with my circuit around the water's edge, a loud splash diverted my attention towards an area some way out, near the middle of the pond. A trail of elongated ripples cut through the reflected lights of the flats, carving out the path of a bird in the water, as an aeroplane's wings lacerate the sky. In the blood-red glow of the moon, I could just about make out the silhouette of two swans skimming the surface of the water, their white feathers standing out in stark contrast to the murky darkness beneath them. I stood for a while and watched them from a distance, as they swam a little closer to where I was standing, but the deep blue of the early evening was already giving way to total darkness as the daylight elapsed into night. I realised that the air had ceased to carry the sound of children's laughter, and I turned back in the direction from which I had come, setting my pace homeward. As I walked, I tilted my eyes upwards and noticed that the night sky was now studded with shimmering stars, their bright light blinking pleasantly in a manner which was somewhat reminiscent of the flame of a candle, caught in a gentle breeze. The park was so peaceful that I could almost kid myself into believing that it was mine exclusively, and perhaps in that moment it was, as it was too dark now to see anything beyond a metre behind or before me. I remained steadfast to the path, nearly losing my footing on a couple of occasions as one of my feet scuffed the grassy hummocks on either side, mottled with frozen moss, and before I even realised it, I found myself passing the grey stone water fountain close to the gated entrance, atop of which sat the statue of a cross-legged Buddha. With the exception of the large pond, this fountain was my favourite thing about the park, and during the summer months it trickled serenely with a fine flow of water. Tiny songbirds, blue tits and sparrows, could often be seen hopping in and out and splashing contentedly as they bathed themselves, fluffing and ruffling their feathers. And although they weren't supposed to, small children would toss in old coins, 1 and 2 peas mostly, watching them sink to the bottom before making a wish. I reached the gate just in time and passed the park keeper on his way to lock up just as I was leaving. "Nice evening," he remarked in a friendly manner, and I nodded. Looking at him as he walked along with a smile on his face and jangling the set of brass keys in his hand, evidently happy and content with his work as he whistled a lively tune, he struck as somewhat reminiscent of the big stone Buddha, satisfied to exist in the moment, at one with nature, on this beautiful crisp winter evening. The children who visited the park only wished to play, and most of the adults ambled along, kept on course only by the direction of the path, which they trusted to see them through one end of the park and safely out the other, their gaze fixed downwards or out ahead, blankly staring, but never truly seeing the beauty which surrounded them. The park keeper's keys rattled in the lock of the large iron gate, and he looked back at me as he sensed my eye still upon him. I suspected that he was the only one besides me who fully appreciated just what a nice evening it really was, and as he passed me again, on his way homeward, he tipped his cap to me in a gentlemanly manner very rarely seen nowadays, still with a friendly smile on his face as he headed in one direction, at the point where the path divided, and I took the other.